Let me just zoom out on human history. What makes empires collapse and what makes them last when they do? When you look at human history in your sense, thinking about the United States perhaps as an empire.
I don't view the United States as an empire.
What's the difference? So to you, empire is a thing that seeks expansion constantly.
Yeah, I think it's a country that incorporates different regions or areas around the world into sort of a giant sphere of influence without incorporating those territories actually into the state itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you had this thing called the British Empire, and it controlled areas like India, uh, North America, uh, and Kenya, just to pick a couple instances at different points. Singapore would be another example. Australia would be another example. So these were all entities that were part of the British Empire, right? And the United States has taken a stab at empire after the Spanish-American War, for example, with regard to the Philippines and Cuba and Puerto Rico. But we never got serious about it. There's never been an American empire. This is not to say the United States is not an incredibly powerful country that goes all around the world building military bases and stationing troops here, there, and everywhere. But we're not running an empire the way the British Empire was run or the French Empire. So the question for me is, why did those empires go away? Why did the British Empire go away? If you ever look at a map of the world in 1922, after World War I, it's truly amazing how much of that map is controlled by Britain, right? They had a huge empire, and it disappeared.
Probably by far the biggest in terms of area empire in human history. I think so.
I think that's right. It almost has to be.
Yeah, right. It's crazy.
Crazy, yeah.
And then no longer is the case.
Yeah. Now, I want to be clear. The Americans have wielded maybe even greater influence than Britain did when it had its empire, but I don't believe we have an empire that bears any resemblance to the British Empire. Mm-hmm. So the question is, what happened to that British Empire? What happened to the French Empire? What happened to the Belgian Empire? What happened to the Dutch Empire? These were countries that had colonies all over the planet. The Dutch East Indies, right? Vietnam was, French Indochina. Where did those empires go? Two factors finished them off. Number one, nationalism. Nationalism became a very powerful force in the 19th century. It began to rear its head in the late 18th century and became a very powerful force in the 19th and certainly in the 20th century.
Can you explain nationalism here?
Nationalism is the idea that these different nations that were part of the empire, like the Kenyans, wanted their own state, nation state. Mm-hmm. This is my point about the Palestinians, right? Mm-hmm. This is Palestinian nationalism. What is Zionism? Zionism is Jewish nationalism. Mm-hmm. Jewish nationalism. Think of Theodor Herzl's famous book. It's called The Jewish State. Nation state, think of the word nation state. That embodies nationalism, nation state, Jewish state. Palestinians want their own state, two-state solution, right? Mm-hmm. Can't beat the Palestinians into submission, right? The Indians wanted their own state. The Pakistanis wanted their own state. The Kenyans wanted their own state. Singapore wanted its own state. Oh, the Americans wanted their own state. This is called the American Revolution, right? So that's the first reason, nationalism, that these empires disappeared. The second reason is that from a cost-benefit analysis, they no longer made any sense. And it was the coming of the Industrial Revolution. Once the Industrial Revolution comes, an empire is basically an albatross around your neck. I would argue that the British Empire was an albatross around Britain's neck in most of the 20th century. Some of my friends disagree with that and think there were all sorts of benefits from the British Empire. But you want to remember that in the 20th century, the three countries that really were powerful were the United States, Germany, and the Soviet Union. Those were the big three. Did any of them have an empire? No.
That's a good card
In
argument.
the industrial world,
Yes.
you don't need, an empire, right? What you need is a powerful manufacturing base.
Well, the cost benefit analysis is different before the Industrial Revolution. There's been many empires.
There's no question that empires came and went, right? I mean,
Yes.
right. And all you have to do is just look at the British and the French in the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763. The British win, they get Canada, right? And that's why, Quebec, Montreal, all these big French-speaking areas are now part of Canada, right? So borders change, and countries got established. The United States being one. And remember, South America and Central America were once completely dominated by the Spanish, and in the case of Brazil, the Portuguese. But they all, in the 19th century, got their independence, right? And what I'm saying to you is in the 19th and in the 20th century, there were two forces that were really driving the train. One is nationalism, and then the other is the Industrial Revolution, which changes the cost-benefit analysis.